ITG 118. I'm Schuyler, Callihan. That's Jed Drenning, the signal caller. It is Phil Friday, and we're going to be talking with Phil here in just a few minutes, talking some Big 12, top 25, and of course, there's Mountaineers taking on the Sooners. But first, we're going to recap our picks from last week. I feel like I did a little bit better, Jed. I didn't keep track this week like I kind of usually do, but maybe you've got some good news for me. So we'll get into that here in just a second. But first, a word from our sponsor, Bet Online, where the game starts. Be sure to get your bets in at betonline.com. So, Jed, take it away.
Well, it just goes to show you the nature in which this game changed last week with Keaton Slovis not playing. He was there in street clothes. I saw him on the field before the game, but we had a Keaton Slovis question that you edited out because it was going to be a waste of everybody's time. So we're not going to talk about the Keaton Slovis question. We had a passing yardage question there we didn't go to. Let's jump right to the question about targets. This was a game that included the two most targeted defenders in the Big 12. The most targeted defender in the entire nation was BYU's Jacob Robinson, with 69 targets coming in. Beanie's number 2 in the Big 12 coming in with 55. So we asked simply, who will be targeted more? Both of us said Beanie. And as it turned out, Beanie was targeted more. He was targeted 7 times. Jacob Robinson was targeted 4. He wasn't even BYU's most targeted defender. But again, the thing with Beanie, he plays the short side. They're going to throw out the short side corner a lot, irrespective of who that is or isn't. So this isn't, indictment on Beanie. And Beanie is producing. We've talked in multiple episodes recently. He has a shot at breaking the school pass breakups record owned by Brian King. He leads the nation by a wide margin in both pass breakups and passes defended. So Beanie's showing out, man. He's among the national leaders in picks with 4. So everybody's saying, well, he needs to stop dropping those picks. Well, I'll tell you this. If he finds a way to intercept 1 or 2 more passes, he's going to be in some All-American conversations, because unfortunately, that's what drives the whole thing. When you have those conversations, interceptions are the only thing that blows people's skirt up. So everything else he's doing well. But if he can do that to wrap up the regular season, boy, he's going to be on a lot of postseason teams, getting a lot of postseason awards based on his production.
Yeah, and especially in big games too, right? Because West Virginia's got a huge one this week. If he somehow comes down with one against Dylan Gabriel, who many people had as a Heisman favorite all year, whoo! Talk about a portal hit. There's been some hits, there's been some misses. Neil's talked about it, but Beanie has been an absolute grand slam.
Sure has, and he's been a great locker room kid too. And so let's go to last week's second question, since we only had 2. BYU rushing. We knew that coming in, they were a football team that struggled to run the football. They were last in the Big 12, averaging 81 yards a game. We pointed out that West Virginia had held 5 of 8 opponents this season below their season rush average, including 3 out of 5 Big 12 opponents. The question, quite simply, was, will West Virginia hold BYU below their season average of 81.3 yards rushing per game? You said no, BYU would get over. I said yes, BYU would get under. Now, remember what I said, Schuyler? The reason I pointed this out, the reason I took the under, I said, as bad as they are running the football, they're even worse on the road. And I even gave it a number. This is just a strange coincidence. I said, on the road, they're only averaging 68 yards a game. Well, right on script, right on cue, against West Virginia, 67 yards. So West Virginia held them under. So I got that one. You missed that one.
I
But
forgot.
I'll tell you what, West Virginia now, 6 out of 9 opponents we've held below their season rushing average. So kudos to Jordan Leslie and that West Virginia defense. So that is how the picks went last week. And of course, we'll get into some Oklahoma picks after the visit with Phil to end the show.
Yeah, that was just a dominant, complete performance from WVU all the way around. And I know we'll get to the Oklahoma stuff, but that's going to be a tough challenge to hold Oklahoma under their season average. I think they're at like 172 or 177. and it may be middle of the pack in the conference, but when you're rushing for 100 or throwing for over 300 yards a game, that 170 starts to feel like well over 200 because they're able to do whatever the hell they want. So that'll be interesting to see what handicaps you got coming up for us here at the end. We're going to go and take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk with the man himself, Phil Steele. So we'll be back right after this message from Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
And we are back with the one and only Phil Steele here to talk some Big 12, Top 25, and West Virginia, Oklahoma. And Phil, this is going to be a big one this week between the Mountaineers and Sooners, but we've got a lot to get to before that. But first, I want to let you have the floor to plug anything that you want that you've got going on this weekend.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. The big thing and the easy thing for anybody watching right now is take the Phil Steele Plus Tour. It's up and available right now. The tour's gone 16-7 over the last 5 weeks on its selections. Quick hitters have gone 12-6, and you also get some FCS plays as well. You get 11 or 12 free plays. They're all up right now free. Just go to philsteele.com. Check out right at the front of the philsteele.com. Click on the Phil Steele Plus Tour, or you can go to YouTube. There's a special YouTube channel for it. It's Take the Phil Steele Plus Tour. It's absolutely free. Give yourself a bunch of free selections.
Awesome, Phil. So we'll go ahead and we'll kick things off here with some top 25 action in the Big Ten. Number 3, Michigan, the Scandalers, or whatever you want to call them, the Sign Stealers, heading to Happy Valley to take on number 10, Penn State. I really don't know what to expect of this game or what to think about what will happen because of the stuff that's going on at Michigan. Where is their headspace? Do they use it as fuel and motivation? What do you think happens in this one here, Phil?
Yeah, I think the way Harbaugh runs that, they're pretty much going to keep everybody in a bunker and just go ahead and play their normal game. And if that's the case, which I think it will be, it's going to be much like my forecast was for the Penn State-Ohio State game. I think this game is an under game. It's going to be a tight defensive struggle. You're looking at a Penn State defense that can get after the quarterback. They got 38 sacks this year. That's 15% of the time the opponent drops back, they get a sack. That's a really high number. Among the nation's leaders in TFLs, they're holding opponents to 102 yards per game, below their season average. And Michigan's run game hasn't been quite the same as it was in past years. Now, Harbaugh's been having the workload on Corum and Edwards lessened. They want to keep them fresh for the end of the year. Maybe they unleash them here, but I still think Penn State's defense does a good job. Now, on the flip side of the coin, we saw Penn State, I think their first third down conversion against Ohio State came on the last one of the game. They went 1 for 16 on third down conversion, struggled to move the ball. Michigan's got a really good defense, holding opponents to 105 yards per game below their season average. Total is about 45.5. I think it'll be a lower scoring game, and I like the under in this one. So I think it will be a really good game. Give Penn State a shot at the upset, but I do think Michigan's a better team.
There's a lot of things that since we've had you on this year, you've taught us a lot of areas that you've shed a light on and had us focusing on, whether it's the offensive line at Alabama or one of the other ones I would point to, Utah being such a fundamentally different football team on the road than they are in Salt Lake City. Well, this week we have a ranked Utah team heading to Washington, and it just feels like another survive and advance type game for Washington. What do you see playing out here?
Yeah, and this is one of those where, as you said, I mean, you look at Utah on the road, they're pretty much a 500 team, and Rice-Eccles Stadium, they're almost unbeatable. The key to this game is going to be that Utah run a game. If they can keep Washington off the field, and Washington's defense, by the way, is susceptible. You look at them in conference play, they're giving up 4.7 yards per carry. They're giving up 65% completions. They do not have an elite defense. They're actually allowing opponents 5 yards above their season average. Utah does have an elite defense. I think they'll be able to slow Washington down. The key is going to be, can Utah move the football? If this thing enters the third quarter and it's close, I think Utah's got a shot at the upset. But if Washington gets ahead by a score or two, this thing could look like the Oregon game when Oregon plastered Utah 35-6, and that game was in Utah. So it's a tough one for me to call. I could see it going either way in this one. I haven't been blown away with Washington overall. I think the best team in the Pac-12 right now is Oregon. Oregon is a team that outgained Washington 541 to 415, if not for 3 failed fourth down conversions. They win in Husky Stadium. And right now, up on philsteele.com, I actually have my Vegas power ratings. If Oregon played Washington this week at a neutral site, Oregon would be a 6-point favorite. So Vegas feels the same way. Oregon's probably the best team in the Pac-12, and this game to me is a real toss-up.
Phil, a top 15 matchup in the SEC between Tennessee and Missouri, and I would almost say it's kind of an underrated game, which sounds weird to say for 2 top 15 teams, but with these guys both out of the mix, certainly in the SEC East, no one's really paying attention to this game, but this is a big one for both of these teams. Mizzou played Georgia tough down to the wire last week. How do they respond? Do you think they get back in the win column here against Tennessee?
Yeah, and Missouri's a little banged up. Luther Burden, questionable for the game. Brady Cook got banged up, but he'll be fine for this one. The thing I like about Tennessee coming in this one is their freshness level. You go back to, the game against Alabama, I thought they played a great game. They had a 20-7 first down edge on the road in the first half, 275 to 133 yard edge, and then came up short at the end. And then the very next week, they traveled to face Kentucky. Kentucky was fresh off a bye. It was a tremendous situation for Kentucky, and yet Tennessee led by 2 scores in the fourth quarter and won the game by 6. This game, they're off of Connecticut. They got rested up. They pulled Joe Milton at the half last week along with most of the starters, so they're fresh. They're ready. Missouri just went to the wire against Georgia. Played a better game than I expected. I liked Georgia last week. They did not cover that game. Georgia only won the game by 9. Missouri covered. So hats off to Missouri for getting that one. But I think coming off that game and now back at home, they got to be a little disappointed. They had the SEC East within their grasp, and now it's gone. And frankly, I feel Tennessee's a better team. So I think you got the better team on the road. I'm going to take the Volunteers to come out of here with the win.
Well, let's go to the ACC. We want to take a look at Miami at Florida State. This is not the season that Miami envisioned, obviously, after that 4-0 start. It's almost like the ghost of that lack of taking a knee against Georgia Tech and that crazy finish is still biting them. Last week, Tyler Van Dyke struggled mightily. Our guy, Tony Gibson, had him seeing ghosts at North Carolina State in that Miami loss. Meanwhile, Florida State is firing on all cylinders. So what do you see shaking out here at Doak Campbell?
I generally, now we're getting into rivalry time here, and I like to go with rivalry underdogs. You figure they get fired up for it. And what we say, what's the saying that most people have for rivalries? You could throw the books out. Well, in this one, when I look at Miami, now Tyler Van Dyke is the key. If Tyler Van Dyke can return to being Tyler Van Dyke, the last 2 weeks since he's returned from injury, he's got 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That's not good. But look at the North Carolina State game. They had a 292 to 231 yard edge, 19 to 12 first down edge. It's a game they could have won had it not been for the turnovers. And Miami, as you mentioned, you go back to the Georgia Tech game. I think that cost them the North Carolina game the next week, a game they led at the half, by the way. But once again, we're down in the turnover count against North Carolina. They were -4 in turnovers there. So I think it's a dangerous Miami team. Their offensive line, I'm on the Joe Moore Award. Of all the awards I'm on, guys, the one I'm probably most proud of is the Joe Moore Award, because this is just a bunch of ex-offensive linemen or ex-offensive line coaches. I'm the only guy that's not an ex-offensive lineman or ex-offensive line coach that's on the award. So I'm very honored by that. And I can tell you Miami's up there, actually. So is Florida State for the Joe Moore. So you've got 2 really good offensive lines. Tyler Van Dyke, if he can cut down on the interceptions. I think when you look at when I talk to Mario Cristobal, he's a guy that doesn't take things lightly. And last year's loss to Florida State, 45-3, you think that doesn't bother him the entire offseason. So I think we're going to see Miami play well. This is a series where the underdog's done extremely well in this series, going 18-7 against the spread, 12 outright upsets. and the home team is just 4-13. So I think Miami keeps this one closer than expected. I think we're going to have a really good game here. I like the underdog in this one.
Speaking of those Georgia Bulldogs, they got a big one this week against number 9 Ole Miss. Let's go down in between the hedges here, Phil. I mean, Ole Miss, they've got a high-powered offense, but I don't know if they've got the defense to be able to keep them in this game. I mean, does Ole Miss really have a fighter's chance in this game?
Yeah, I mean, if Missouri could play Georgia close last week, I think Mississippi's a better team than Missouri, so they've got that opportunity. And, you know, as far as their defense goes, they are actually holding opponents to 18 yards per game below their season average this year. They have taken on some pretty good offenses during the course of the year. Now, the one thing I look at in this game is probably how teams do against ranked teams. And when you look at Georgia this year, they've got a really good record. They're about 67% against ranked teams. When you look at Ole Miss, when they play a ranked team, they're about 33%. So it's a game where Georgia has got that big advantage. But, you know, you go back to that Mississippi at Alabama game. Mississippi led at half, 7-6. Wasn't completely outplayed by Alabama. Came up short on the scoreboard, lost by 14. So they played pretty good there. And they played a really good Texas A&M team last week. And after blowing a lead, came back and actually got the win at the end. So I'll be honest with you, Georgia disappointed me last week against Missouri. I don't know if I want to fire on Georgia again this week. It's going to be a game that I'm just going to sit back and watch. I think Vegas has got the number right at about 11.5.
Let's say this, Phil. We're gonna jump into the Big 12, but before we do, you mentioned Miami, Florida State being closer than people feel, and that has that same vibe. You kind of called the Clemson win last week over Notre Dame. We asked you, why is that line so close? And you made a case for Clemson. Lo and behold, here's the upset. So stay on high alert in Tallahassee when those Hurricanes are coming to town, if you're listening. Let's go to the Big 12. You have Texas Tech, Joey McGuire's squad. They kind of won a game in Lubbock between two desperate teams last week. They knocked off TCU. They're standing at 4 wins after such an off season of feeling like they were anointed. Now they're heading to Lawrence to take on a Kansas team that's on the verge of having an incredibly special season. What do you see playing out here?
Is this game at home or on the road for Texas Tech, guys?
There you go. That's the answer, right?
Yeah, when Texas Tech goes on the road, they're a completely different team. You go back to the Wyoming game where we picked Wyoming to beat them, West Virginia where we picked West Virginia to beat them. I was surprised they beat Baylor on the road, but then we picked them to BYU to beat them on the road, and now this game's at Kansas. And I have to be 100% honest with you. I had Iowa State over Kansas last week. This Kansas team has impressed me the last 2 weeks. I love the way their offensive line's playing. Their offensive line is a fringe candidate for the Joe Moore Award at this point. Love the way that Jason Bean's playing. And Lance Leipold, talking to him all the way back to his days at Buffalo, this guy just gets it done. And the teams are so fundamentally strong. They did get that interception return in the second quarter, which I thought was huge in the Iowa State game. But this team's just playing great. Frankly, I'm surprised the number's so low. It's like 2.5, 3.5 in this one. It's a pretty cheap price, especially when Texas Tech, you play on them at home, you play against them on the road, and Kansas has been just great at home. They beat Oklahoma. They wiped out UCF. They wiped out BYU. They wiped out Illinois. I definitely like Kansas minus the points over Texas Tech in this one.
Speaking of home and away splits, Baylor is they are bad at home. So maybe it's a good thing that they're going on the road, but it's also a bad thing that they've got Kansas State this week, who's coming off a very close loss to Texas in overtime. So I guess the better question here is, Phil, is the line a surprise to you being at 20.5? I mean, I get Baylor's had a lot of struggles this year, but I mean, this is a Dave Aranda coach team that you feel like should be able to compete. I mean, can they hang in with Kansas State?
Yeah, and you talk about a surprising year, guys. I mean, when you look at the schedule at the start of the year for Baylor, you said, okay, this team actually has 6 home games or 7 home games in their first 9 games of the year. So they're going to get off to a great start. They're dynamite at home. And then as you touched on, in FBS home games this year, they are 0-6. Shocking. What are they on the road this year? They're 2-0. They beat UCF and they beat Cincinnati. Granted, they needed a miracle comeback against UCF, but they have been playing better on the road. So with Baylor, I got to be honest, they haven't had a good pulse on Baylor because I thought they'd win more of their home games than what they have. But I have had a pretty good pulse on Kansas State. And the one thing they've done is covered their last 7 home games. And the last 2 home games, they beat Houston 41-0, and they beat a really good TCU team 41-3. They used Will Howard more. They were alternating Howard and Johnson. Last week it was basically Will Howard, but they still have Avery Johnson back there. They've got Giddens and Ward at running back. They've got a defense holding opponents to 62 yards per game below their season average. And I thought last week would have been one of those circle the wagon games for Baylor, but they came up short against Houston, the team they really should have beat at home. Granted, they had their opportunities, lost the game in overtime, had plenty of opportunities to win the game, but did not. So I think the line is reflective of where these two teams are right now, and it'd be tough to go against Kansas State at home. So I like the Wildcats at home, and I'm laying the points in that one.
Speaking of lines that you have to explain to us, here you go. You got Oklahoma State, the 15th ranked team in the country, going on the road with Ollie Gordon against a UCF team. Now, granted, UCF coming off their first Big 12 win against Cincinnati last week, but UCF dead last in the Big 12 against the run, facing Ollie Gordon. I think maybe the secret here is Oklahoma State, and a lot of folks don't know this, have the last place defense in the Big 12 in total defense. So 2.5 points the last I saw this line with the Cowboys heading to the bounce house. What do you see happening here?
Yeah, and like you, I think the spread's a little off in this game. I do like Oklahoma State. You guys know Oklahoma State's been my gravy train. I've been riding these guys since the Kansas State game, and they've been delivering each and every week. And the concern would be, as you mentioned, the defense. I mean, giving up 477 yards per game the last 4 weeks, UCF will be able to move the football, but the key matchup is exactly what you hit on. I have to applaud you on that. Ollie Gordon against a UCF rush defense that's given up 5.7 yards per carry in Big 12 play. That's almost 6 yards a carry. And you know Ollie Gordon, who was banged up last week. When did he come out of the game? Like 4, 5, 6 times last week. And you're like, uh-oh, he might not come back in. He kept coming back in. I think he'll be healthier this week. And the key with Oklahoma State was it switched to 1 quarterback as opposed to 3. I'm not jumping off this gravy train. I'm taking Oklahoma State. And to me, the spread is cheap this week, guys.
A big one in the American, just kidding, in the Big 12. Cincinnati and Houston here. The Bearcats still searching for that first Big 12 win. Meanwhile, Houston, if they win 2 of their last 3, they're going bowling. There's still a lot to play for Cincinnati. Again, even if it's a 2-7 season, it's a disappointing year. They want to get that monkey off their back. But this seems a little bit of an uphill battle on the road. Maybe I'm wrong. Phil, where does Cincinnati stand coming into this one and their chances?
Well, you know, statistically, Cincinnati's a pretty good team. I mean, they're actually outgaining their foes by 4 yards per game in Big 12 play, which is a pretty surprising number. You go back and you take a look at, their halftimes. The halftimes have all been good. The UCF game was close at half. The Oklahoma State game was close at half. BYU close at half. Oklahoma, every game was close at half. Then the second half, they seem to melt down a little bit. And Emory Jones, while he has a 14-10 ratio this year, keep in mind his 5 touchdown passes against Eastern Kentucky. So against FBS competition, he's got 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And that's the key. If you can take away Cincinnati's run game, you're in good shape. Houston has an adequate run defense. In fact, the last 4 weeks are only allowing 3.9 yards per carry. Their question mark is pass defense, giving up 72%, but I don't think Cincy threatens them that much here. But in Big 12 play, Houston's actually minus 89 yards per game. So you can make an argument Cincinnati's a better team. That's why the number's 3 here. I actually have it at 3. I've got Houston winning the game because they're at home by 3, but I'd have a tough time putting my money on Houston minus the points. And same thing, I'd have a tough time putting my money on Cincinnati, who just continues to come up short at the end of the game.
Oh, you got the Longhorns, the 7th-ranked team in the country, as a double-digit favorite, heading to Amon G. Carter to take on TCU. Now, TCU's banged up. They're going to have Josh Hoover at quarterback again. Can a case be made for a TCU team? They're at 4 wins. They got to win 2 of their final 3. They still got Texas and they got Oklahoma to get bowl eligible after that great season last year. Texas has struggled defensively in pass defense through the air against Baylor, against Houston, against Kansas State. All of them went over 300 yards through the air. Can you make a case for TCU against a Texas team that's really struggled behind center protecting the football with Quinn Ewers out?
Yeah, I could make a case because just look at the series history here. Do you know in the last 9 times these teams met, how many times has TCU won, guys?
Ooh.
Gary Patterson owns Texas.
That's right,
So
7, 7 and
7.
2.
Wow.
Which is
Wow.
shocking. I mean, you would not think TCU has beaten Texas 7 of the last 9 meetings, but they have. But Gary Patterson's not there anymore, so that's one
right.
thing you have to take a look at. Now, Sonny Dykes did win Game 1 last year, but you guys probably remember that game. That thing at the half was 3-0, and Texas had 72 yards and TCU had 68. A first down was hard to come by in that game, so it was. I'm a defensive guy. I enjoyed the game. I'm not one of those offensive people that has to have 40 points on the board to enjoy a game. So I did like the struggle last year, but I think Texas is a better team, and TCU's just flat out struggling. I like TCU with their chances against Texas Tech last week, and they came back in the second half and took the lead, but then all of a sudden they lost it by 7, and the Kansas State game was not good. Josh Hoover's going to play decent, but I just like the way this Texas team looks. I like their offensive line. I like the running backs, the receivers. I like the defense. I like the special teams. Quinn Ewers has been practicing a little bit this week. May return. Malik Murphy can only get better. So I'm going to lean with Texas to come out of here with the win for sure.
A pair of 5-4 teams here, one of which is still alive in the Big 12 race, and that's Iowa State heading to BYU, who has scored 13 points over their last 2 games. Obviously, the quarterback change there with Jake Retzlaff now taking control of the offense. How do you see this one going, Phil?
Yeah, and this is one of those games, guys, where if you look at the record, you say, okay, 2 5-4 teams, BYU should be a 3-point favorite, right? Because they're at home, and they are a really good home team, by the way. And then you look at the line in Vegas, and Iowa State's a 7-point favorite. You're like, what's going on? Well, Vegas knows what they're doing because these two teams are not equal. Iowa State is a really good 5-4 team. Their losses, they lost by 7 points to Iowa, a 3-point loss to Ohio, and in both games they had the yardage edge, they had the first down edge. The Oklahoma game was close in the second quarter, then Oklahoma just turned it on and beat them. But the Kansas game is a game they could have won last week. So I like the way they run the football. Sanders and Norton are a nice running back combo. They got Rocco Becht, who's playing better each week at the quarterback spot, and they've got a really good defense. They're holding opponents to 68 yards per game, below their season average. Over the last 4 weeks, they're holding opponents to 130 yards per game below their season average. I like this Iowa State team. BYU, this is what I call a smoke and mirrors team. I mean, the Kansas game earlier in the season, they beat Arkansas. They were outgained by 143 yards. They beat Cincinnati. They were outgained by 203 yards. On the season, they're minus 166 yards per game in Big 12 play, and yet somehow they got 5 wins on the year. They cannot run the football. They've got 80 yards rushing, 2.9. As you mentioned, Retzlaff taking over at QB. He was adequate last week, nothing great. Their defense is allowing opponents 41 yards above the season average the last 4 weeks. They're a team that's done it with smoke and mirrors. Now, you could talk about the altitude. You could talk about the crowd, and it's great at BYU. But I like the way Iowa State went into Cincinnati and won by 20. They went into Baylor and won by 12. I like Iowa State minus the touchdown in this one. I think they are the much better 5-4 team.
All right, we're going to jump into the matchup on the Prairie, Phil. We had mentioned to you we have a fella in Australia named Jake Botel, who was the winner of our Pick 4 contest, the first cat to actually go 4 for 4. How impressive do you think that is to go 4 for 4 in these picks that we have each week, Phil?
It's very impressive. First one, I believe you guys called him the Neil Armstrong here, the first guy that landed on the moon. So congratulations to Jake Botel. And Jake, thank you for listening all the way from Australia, for crying out loud. I love it. A football fan in Australia. I like being worldwide. But going 4 for 4 in those picks last week, Jake, that was phenomenal. And you definitely have earned your the first winner here of the. Are you guys officially calling it the Neil Armstrong Award?
We kind of are. Yeah, we kind of are.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. So the first winner of the Neil Armstrong Award, maybe next year when we do this podcast, guys, I'll let my computer enter it. We can have my computer picks for the top one each week and see if my computer can pick out the winner each week.
Your computer is invited. That's an open invitation, no doubt about it. So what we got
I'll mention it to him today.
And I'll make sure to get with Phil to see what his computer says before I put my pick in. Just
Yeah, we don't have a no droids allowed rule here. Your computer is welcome. So let's look at this matchup in Oklahoma. On the surface, some people are saying it's as simple as one team's trending up in West Virginia, another team appears to be trending down, but Vegas doesn't think so. The line is standing strong at 13. It'll be our last trip to the Prairie for quite some time, maybe forever, but in today's college football, I don't like to say forever. 2 years ago, Phil, when we went out there, we felt we were in position to win that football game, despite the fact we only ran for 68 yards. We held the ball for 33 minutes. Similar plan last year. Time of possession to Morgantown in the win, 37 minutes. So what do you see shaking out? What I'm seeing here, I do think West Virginia is a fundamentally better football team than the one that went to Norman 2 years ago. I'm not so sure Oklahoma is quite as talented or quite as good as they are, as that 21 team that won 11 games under Lincoln Riley. What do you see playing out here?
Well, as you guys know, I've been picking West Virginia most weeks. Had them against Pitt, had them against Texas Tech, had them against TCU, had them against Houston, and that Hail Mary was a little bit of a bummer. I had Oklahoma State plus the points against them, but you had them against UCF, had them against BYU. Unfortunately, guys, this week I do like Oklahoma. I think when you look at the Sooners, they're coming off 2 losses. They haven't looked good the last 2 weeks. We're going to get their absolute A game. They need to pull it together. You look at how they finished. They've got BYU and TCU. Those are 2 games they should be able to win. Love the way West Virginia plays. And if West Virginia, much like Utah, can keep this one close, if they can establish that run game, which Oklahoma's going to sell out to stop. By the way, I'm on the Joe Moore Award. I'm pushing for West Virginia to be included on this finalist list. We'll see if we can't get them there, because Coach Neil Brown told me about the offensive line in the spring, and they have lived up to that potential. But I'm not wild about the pass game, and also I think the defense is, while playing good, beatable. I mean, 433 against TCU, 491 against Oklahoma State, 463 against UCF, and this is an Oklahoma team off 2 losses, playing with legitimate revenge at home. I've actually got the Sooners win this one by a couple of touchdowns. So, I did a Louisiana show last week, and a lot of weeks I pick LSU, and last week at the end I'm like, I'm picking Alabama. Sorry. And unfortunately for them, Alabama won. But, I'm jumping off the West Virginia bandwagon for 1 week, guys. I'm taking Oklahoma.
That's okay. I feel like you'll be back on the next 2 weeks potentially with Cincinnati and Baylor coming back. So, Phil, last thing before we get out of here, I did want to ask you kind of your thoughts on the Oklahoma kind of tailspin the last 2 weeks. You kind of wonder where their psyche is, because you think you're in the college football playoff race. Dylan Gabriel's kind of one of those guys that was being talked about for the Heisman. You lose 2 straight games, and you might start to play a little tight and feel like the pressure is on you. Do you feel like that could be something that plays in a factor in this game?
I think if it was a team like Georgia or Alabama, but this is an Oklahoma team that last year actually finished with a losing season after they lost the bowl game. They were 6-7. So, while they were up there in the talk for making the playoff this year, I don't know if coming into the season, the thought process was, hey, playoff or bust. You know what I mean? Because you're coming off a 6-7 season. So I don't know if the 2 losses will have that the bubble burst effect on Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's right now thinking, okay, we were 6-7 last year. We've opened up 7-2. If we finish off 10-2, we had a really good year. And next year, we'll see what happens. So I don't see the bubble burst happening for them this week.
So it'll be a good one. West Virginia and Oklahoma, essentially an elimination game in the Big 12 title race. Phil, as always, man, we appreciate your time and getting all the knowledge that we can soak up before the weekend.
Hey, a lot of fun talking football with you guys each and every week. And, man, only 3 weeks left of the football season. How fast did this thing fly by?
It's crazy. It's unbelievable. It feels like we were just previewing the Penn State game.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Phil, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week, and we'll be back right here after this word from Fortis. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, be sure to visit fortis.us.com.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
All right, so it is our final segment of the show and of the week. It is our ITG handicap picking segment. So, Jed, what do you got in store for us this week for West Virginia OU?
Let's jump right into it. Three things we're going to look at. We're going to make a pick. 1 and 2, you understand, is that I'm going to say they're loosely connected, but here we go. Number 1, third downs. The question is this. When you look at third down conversions, West Virginia's trips to the prairie. In 2021, I'm just going to go back through the years, 21, 19, 17, 15, 13. We were 4 of 14, 5 of 18, 6 of 13, 8 of 23 of 13. All told, we're 33% in the games we played as Big 12 Conference members on the prairie. West Virginia on the season offensively, 42%, number 6 in the Big 12. Oklahoma defensively, 29%, number 3 in the Big 12. Now, last year, West Virginia's defense, one of the critical points in that game, held Oklahoma to 1 for 11 on third down. Meanwhile, West Virginia was 7 of 19. So, a lot of numbers flying around here. I'm going to leave you with 2 more and then ask the question. On the road, West Virginia has the number 2 third down defense in the Big 12, 46%. At home, Oklahoma has the number 2 Big 12 third down defense. So there's your matchup. So the question, quite simply, with that information, who will convert a higher percentage of third downs, West Virginia or Oklahoma?
I'm going to go Oklahoma, and the only reason I'm going to say that is because, like I've kind of mentioned a couple times this week, I think Neal is going to throw the kitchen sink at Oklahoma and understand that he's going to get into some 4-down territories multiple times throughout this game. So they're going to call some things that they're trying to get to maybe a 4th and short if they can't convert on third down. So I think Oklahoma's got a better chance to convert on third. So, yeah, I'll go Oklahoma with West Virginia playing 4 down a lot of the game.
I am for the same reason, which leads us to question number 2. In the last 2 games against Oklahoma, West Virginia is 6 for 7 on 4th down, including last year in Morgantown, West Virginia was 4 for 5.
Wow.
That's part of the reason we held the ball for 37 minutes.
Yeah.
So question number 2, quite simply, West Virginia's 4th downs against Oklahoma, over under 2.5.
Conversions, you say? Or
attempts?
Over 2.5 for sure. I think 3, maybe even 4. That's if they get to that many 4th downs. But I think that they know that that's how you steal possessions in these types of games. If you get another pick or a fumble, you're just soaking time away from Oklahoma. So I think they're definitely going to go over.
Yeah, last year we attempted 5 in Morgantown. We were 4 for 5. I'm going with the over as well on that one. So question number 3. Let's stray from the transition downs and go here. Oklahoma last year in Morgantown was up with a quirky score at halftime of 12-6. 2 years ago, in the game that we felt we let slip away on the prairie, West Virginia was up 10-7 in 2021. So the question number 3 is, what will be happening at halftime Saturday night in Norman? Will WV be leading, Oklahoma be leading, or will it be tied?
I'm going to go Whoa. I'm going to go Oklahoma lead, but not by much, because I'm picking West Virginia this week. I've said this whole week I have this really weird gut feeling about this game. I understand they're dang near 2-touchdown underdogs, but I'm going with West Virginia to win this game. And so, yeah, I think Oklahoma comes out. Maybe it's like a 13-10 game at the half, and West Virginia bounces back and finds a way to knock off the Sooners.
West Virginia, Schuyler was a bigger underdog against TCU than they were against Oklahoma. So the question becomes, can you do that twice in 1 year? That's what the question really becomes. We've done it before, but each time you do it, it gets harder to do it a second time. But I'm going to say this: I'm going to go with the. Let's straighten the pack here. I'm going to go C. I'm going to say it's tied at halftime.
Ooh.
I mean, I could see hopefully somewhat of a low-scoring game. Who knows? These things sometimes surprise you, but it might be 24-all. Who knows? But I look for more of a low-scoring game in this one in the first half as these teams are feeling each other out. I'm going to go C. It's tied at halftime, and I think that would be advantage West Virginia. But
yeah, and if you get that one right, you deserve to win the whole weekend, because that's really, really hard. Like, the odds on that are like plus 10,000 probably. So we'll see what happens. West Virginia, Oklahoma, 7 o'clock kickoff on Fox out in Norman. Again, essentially a Big 12 elimination game, and we'll have the recap / preview or look ahead with Big Daddy next week, with the Cincinnati Bearcats coming to town for Senior Day next week. But you can catch all of our coverage on our YouTube channel at In the Gun. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Check out the game preview with Wes, Jed, and Owen, who chopped in a few minutes late, but had his cartoon thrown up there for a few seconds, which you'll get a kick out of. So we appreciate you guys for tuning in for another week of game coverage here on In the Gun, and always be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. You've been In the Gun.